There's a number that quietly controls more financial futures than people realize. Not a million, not even six figures. $750. Not because it's a large amount, but because of what people do with it. For one person, $750 disappears every month without thought. For another, that same $750 becomes the foundation of financial control, leverage, and long-term wealth. Same income range, same economy, same starting point. Completely different outcomes. This isn't about discipline in the traditional sense. It's not about cutting coffee or extreme budgeting. It's about a pattern, a repeatable decision that compounds over time, not just in money, but in identity, behavior, and financial positioning. Because wealth doesn't begin when you make more money. It begins the moment you start directing money differently. And for most people, that moment never happens. 1. The invisible line most people never cross. There's a stage in life where income increases, but nothing else changes. You earn more than you did last year, maybe even more than you ever have before. But your financial situation still feels the same. Because the problem isn't income, it's absorption. Money comes in and gets absorbed immediately. Bills expand, lifestyle adjusts, comfort increases. And without noticing, you build a system where every dollar already has a destination. Every increase gets neutralized. Every opportunity gets delayed. This is where most people live, not broke in the obvious sense, but stuck in a cycle where progress never compounds. Now here's where the $750 habit appears. At some point, there's a moment, small, almost unnoticeable, where someone chooses to not absorb everything. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a portion. Around $500, $700, $750. And instead of letting it disappear into lifestyle, they redirect it. That's it. That's the line. Because that decision does something most people underestimate. It breaks the automatic consumption pattern. And once that pattern breaks, everything starts to change. 2. Why $750 matters more than $7,500. Most people think wealth starts with big money, large investments, high salaries, major opportunities. But that's not how financial systems actually work. Because money doesn't respond to size first. It responds to structure. And $750 sits at a very specific psychological and financial level. It's not small enough to ignore, but not big enough to feel powerful, which makes it dangerous because people treat it casually. It becomes dining upgrades, impulse purchases, subscriptions, short-term comfort decisions. And over time, it becomes invisible. But here's what wealthy individuals do differently. They don't look at $750 as spending money. They see it as a unit of control, a repeatable investment block, a system-building tool. Because $750 consistently deployed isn't about the amount. It's about what it trains. It trains delayed gratification, pattern recognition, long-term thinking, risk awareness, opportunity scanning, and most importantly, it creates separation. Not instantly, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, and permanently. 3. The system that changes everything. Here's where the difference becomes real. The broke mindset treats money like moments. Earn arrow, spend arrow, reset. The wealthy mindset treats money like systems. Earn arrow, allocate arrow, multiply arrow, repeat. That $750, it becomes the entry point into system thinking, not random investing, not guessing, but intentional structure. For example, instead of asking, "What can I buy this month?" the question becomes, "Where should this $750 go to work?" And over time, that question evolves into systems like automated investing, asset accumulation, cash flow generation, risk distribution. And suddenly, money is no longer reactive. It becomes strategic. Because once you start allocating consistently, you stop relying on motivation. You rely on structure. And structure is what creates predictability, growth, leverage. This is where most people fall behind. Not because they don't have money, but because they never build a system that uses it correctly. 4. The identity shift no one talks about. At first, the $750 habit feels small, almost pointless. You don't see massive results immediately, no big jumps, no dramatic changes. But something subtle begins to happen. You stop seeing yourself as someone who spends money and start seeing yourself as someone who directs it. That shift changes everything because identity drives behavior, and behavior drives outcomes. When you consistently invest, allocate, and control money, you begin to think differently. You notice opportunities faster. You avoid unnecessary risk. You become less emotional with money. You make decisions based on long-term impact. And over time, you stop chasing money. You start building systems that attract it. This is the real difference. Wealthy people don't rely on effort alone. They rely on alignment between identity and action. And that alignment begins with small, repeated decisions, like what you do with $750. 5. The compound effect most people miss. Here's the part that feels slow, until it doesn't. Consistency, not intensity, not luck, just repetition. Because when $750 is deployed every month, over time, it creates momentum. Not just in numbers, but in positioning. You gain exposure to markets. You learn timing. You understand cycles. You develop confidence. And then something shifts. Opportunities that once felt out of reach start becoming realistic because you're no longer starting from zero. You're operating from momentum. And momentum changes how money behaves. It accelerates growth. It amplifies decisions. It reduces recovery time from mistakes. This is why small amounts matter, not because they make you rich overnight, but because they build the foundation that allows wealth to scale later. Without that foundation, even large amounts collapse. 6. Why most people never build this habit. If it's this simple, why doesn't everyone do it? Because the challenge isn't financial, it's psychological. People struggle with short-term gratification, inconsistent behavior, lack of clear systems, emotional decision-making, and most importantly, they underestimate small amounts. They believe it's not enough to matter. So they wait. They wait for more income, better timing, perfect conditions. And while they wait, nothing compounds. Meanwhile, someone else is quietly building momentum, month after month, without needing perfect knowledge, perfect timing, perfect strategy, just consistency. And over time, that consistency creates a gap that becomes harder to close. 7. The long game that always wins. There's a reason why wealth often looks slow at first, because it's not designed for immediate results. It's designed for stability and scale. The $750 habit isn't about speed, it's about direction, because direction determines outcome. And most people never set a clear financial direction. They move, but without alignment. They earn, but without structure. They spend, but without intention. So progress never compounds. But when you commit to a consistent allocation habit, you create a direction. And over time, that direction becomes inevitable. Not because of luck, not because of one big decision, but because of hundreds of small ones stacked together. The decision that defines the future. At some point, this stops being about money and becomes about choice. Not a dramatic choice, not a life-changing moment, just a quiet decision. What will you do with the next $750? Let it disappear or let it build something? Because the difference between broke and wealthy isn't always income. It's what happens in the space between earning and spending, and that space is where everything changes. So from here, there are only two paths. One where nothing compounds, and one where everything does. The amount stays the same, but the outcome becomes completely different.